Well, welcome everybody. There's no viewers in at the moment, but I'm going to start this live stream because what I really want to talk about tonight, and just keep it at the one subject. I've invited Mel on, and Pixie's channel. He's coming on to discuss the subject. And if there's any more in the chat who eventually want to come on, you are quite welcome. Well, what I want to talk about tonight is domestic abuse. What is the definition of domestic abuse? Facts and stats about domestic abuse. More facts about domestic abuse. How widespread is domestic abuse, and what is the impact? Hello, BK and Granny Monster. I'm here, and what a topic. Yes, it is a topic, Granny Monster. It's a topic that I've been wanting to chat about because there's a lot of domestic abuse going on. I mean, I've only got the figures for England here. I'm just having a look where I wrote them down. In 2013-14 in the UK, there was 887,000 domestic abuse incidents in the UK, in England and Wales. And on average, victims of high risk or serious harm or murder were about 2 to 3 years before getting help. So mainly it's about abuse on men, because men tend not to go running to the authorities or talking about that. So what's your opinions on that, Mel?
Well, I mean, domestic abuse is definitely it's a touchy subject. It's a life-altering and changing event. There are all sorts of statistics that we have here from America, from the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence. They have statistics saying that on average, nearly 20 people per minute are physically abused by an intimate partner in the United States during 1 year. This equates to more than 10 million women and men. 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men have been victims of some form of physical violence by an intimate partner within their lifetime. 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men have been victims of several or severe physical violence by an intimate partner in their lifetime. And it goes on and has more statistics and stuff like that, talking about over 20,000 phone calls placed to domestic hotlines nationwide. But my thing about it is that it's definitely a stigma to it. So
sorry about that, Mel.
Say, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can still hear you.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a serious issue that probably doesn't get enough attention because of the stigmatisms that come attached to it, as far as how people say, when you deal with domestic situations, there's a shame that people have for having to go through that. There's an anger that people feel, there's an apathy that comes with it, because there's a lot of people who say, if you're dealing with a significant other and there's a power imbalance, you should leave the person alone. But usually when the authorities come, the person that's being abused may try to protect the abuser at times, or there's a manipulation that goes on. Maybe there's kids involved. Maybe there's a business situation. It's a complicated, complex subject because it's not always clear cut on the surface. There's always more to the situation than people are willing to talk about.
Yeah, I agree on that. So why do you think, Mel, that men don't really discuss domestic violence or domestic abuse?
You said, why do I think men don't discuss it?
Yeah.
Say your question again.
Why do you think men do not discuss being domestically abused?
Oh, well, it's a stigmatism that comes with it. As a man who wants to admit that they may be getting beat up on, by a woman or another man, or it's a stereotype that a man is supposed to be strong and you can't be abused even if it's just verbally. It's a situation where they say you're a sissy, you're a punk, or whatever derogatory insensitive terms that people use. And we don't have to say them here. So it's a situation where you're looked at as less of a man if you talk about how you're being abused by somebody who's not a man.
Yeah.
So so no matter what the situation is. And a lot of times when it comes to domestic abuse, we don't talk about the verbal abuse. There's a lot of men out there who take verbal abuse,
Yeah,
and they may have to take the verbal abuse because they know that if they try to respond physically, now it's a physical domestic violence situation, even if the woman was provoking the man. And it gets touchy because now once you start talking about how men are being abused, then there may be some women that feel some type of way because they say they get it worse than the men. And I do agree that they get it worse than the men, but there are men who get abused.
yeah, there is. Yeah, because I mean, when you look at the figures in the UK, it reckons there's about 8% of domestic abuse cases are on men, but the authorities think it's a lot higher because there's only 8% of the men that do come forward.
Well, the reason they don't come forward is because there's still a stigmatism attached to a man being abused by somebody, who may be weaker than him physically. So they look at the domestic side of it as domestic abuse as just being a physical thing, and domestic abuse is not just physical. It can definitely be mental. It can definitely be mental, psychological, meaning like, people play mind games with you and manipulate you in different ways. It can definitely be a verbal thing, emotional abuse, financially, so it's just things people hold over your head. So it's so many intricate things. And the reason why it's a touchy issue is because, of stereotypes that are put out there. And then also on top of that, there's the family component. Usually, domestic abuse rarely ever comes from somebody that's not an intimate partner with you.
Yeah, yeah.
Rarely.
I've just seen the Donny Shaw show. He's put a mental abuse as well, So we are talking about all types of abuse here, Donny. So if you'd like to come on the panel, you are quite welcome. Oh, we've got Chris here now. Good evening, Chris. So what's your thoughts on domestic abuse?
Well, is that for women and men, or just
well on men at the moment we're discussing
on men, right? Well, it's like I would like to admit that I would get beat up by a woman. I don't know about anybody else.
Yeah, I wouldn't. Yeah, fully agree.
You go to the coppers and say I'm getting beat up by my missus, and they'll probably turn around and say, "Well, man up, mate." You know what I mean?
Yeah. Can I just mention Granny's comments in there? Roughly 5,365,000 men had been victims of intimate partner physical violence in the previous 12 months. Thanks a lot for that, back, Granny. I really appreciate that. Sorry, Chris, carry on then.
Yeah, it's like I said, I definitely wouldn't want to be admitting that I was getting beat up by a woman. Not because some men may seem strong on the outside, but on the inside, really, they're just a little. How can I put it? A shell of themselves, of what they're trying to portray in real life.
Yeah, I agree on that.
True.
Yeah,
this is true.
Like myself, I mean, I'm a normal man. I would keep it to myself. I wouldn't discuss it with my friends, work colleagues, or anything like that. And that's what most men do. Whereas women will talk about it with their friends in their, circle of friends or community. And they will seek help after so long.
Yeah, after so long. But yeah, hey, what's going on, Chris? But there is a hey, all right now. I'm all right. How's everything with you?
Yeah, I'm not too bad, mate. Sorry, I was interrupting.
Yeah, but I'll say for the women though, there is a stigmatism with them. There is a shame for being mentally abused, because when a woman is abused, from just different women that I dealt with, there's a shame that they feel for not being in control. Like just when it comes to domestic violence. Sometimes domestic violence includes domestic assault. When it comes to sexual assault and stuff like that. That's definitely a part of it. So for a man, we have the stigma of it, but they get the brunt of the abuse, the women, when it comes to them, because sometimes it's so much more demoralizing. It's so much more debilitating, so.
But sometimes for the man as well, he can be sexually assaulted by his partner or wife or what have you. You know what I mean?
It definitely does happen. Yes, it does. Yeah. I mean, and I think, go ahead.
Go on then, Mel. Sorry.
I think, and I'm glad he brought that point up. I think when it's a sexual assault attached to the domestic violence for a man, I think he's less likely to come forward, because who wants to admit that they were abused sexually by another woman?
Exactly.
Exactly.
You know,
I've invited the Midnight Raven on. She's muted her mic at the moment because she put in a comment that she had a male friend that was domestically abused. So I would like to hear that story from Raven when she's fully on, you know.
It's definitely.
If anyone wants to come on the panel to discuss domestic abuse, because it is a subject that people don't really talk about. You don't see a lot of it in the papers. You know, I mean, I've never had anybody approach me about it.
But there's also another side of it. There's a side of it where people get fed up with the some people have an apathy for it. Like, let's say you have somebody who's being domestically abused, right? And you're telling the person to leave, and the person doesn't leave, and they're constantly trying to protect their abuser. Now, all of a sudden, there's people who want to help, but they're stuck in between a rock and a hard place, because now this person is protecting the person that's abusing them. What do you do?
Yeah, that is it. What do you do in that situation? Have you got any thoughts on that, Chris?
I'm thinking at the moment, so I'll let you go on to somebody else.
Yeah, okay then. We'll invite Raven on to discuss what her friend went through, that she's just mentioned in the chat. Well, you said you had a male friend, Donna, that went through domestic abuse. So can you tell us a little bit about your friend? You know what he went through. Don't mention any names.
No. Basically, he met a girl online. They got together. He moved to a different country to be with her. Everything was hunky-dory. And then stuff just started to change slowly. He'd get name-calling. And it just started off slightly like, oh, you don't bring enough money in. And she was nagging. So it was just all like little by little. When that didn't work, in her eyes, she then started knocking him around, and then when that didn't work, and she obviously didn't get what she wanted from it, she actually poisoned him, and said that if he wasn't going to do what she wanted, she was going to get rid of him permanently. So she actually poisoned him and actually tried to kill him.
Cool.
She put him in hospital, and he nearly died. And even after that, guys, 5 minutes. Oh, where's my sweetie? Look, even after poisoning him and trying to kill him, he still didn't press charges or do anything against her, because he saw her as his wife, and he just let it slide. Basically, they did break up eventually, but she left him. But he never pressed charges or did anything against her because it was his wife.
Yeah, and that's the usual case. So we're welcoming Granny Monster onto the panel. What's your thoughts, Granny, on this?
Hey, Granny Monster.
Hi.
Hi, Granny.
Chance to talk to you there, and some of these other guys been associates and friends for a long time. The topic, of course, is a bit intriguing, and it's a very personal thing for many reasons. I would suggest that as we as a society progress, I think that it is lovely that we are finding out and can come forward if they are subject to whatever sort of domestic relationship they have with their partner. And I would encourage for any female trying to but I would encourage that in any gender and in any kind of dynamic. I feel like something is toxic and not right for you, whether it's more spiritual, and and seek the help level that you need.
You're breaking up a bit, Granny. Well, quite a lot. So I don't know whether you're walking about outside.
No, I'm not walking about. I think maybe Mel is, or somebody got some back.
Okay, it's probably is me.
All right, I'm.
Oh, it's Mel, is it? He's walking
Okay, I'll
about.
mute it. I'll mute it. I'll mute it.
Okay then. Sorry about
mute
that,
it.
Granny. Carry on.
No, it's quite all right. I love Mel unconditionally. That's a smooth operator right there. But yeah, what I was saying is I think we have advanced in a society where it's a twofold sword, unfortunately, in that, yes, abuse for the male gender is on the uprise, but there is that also side that suggests now we have come to that level within our society where they should have the freedom and ability and protections the same as a female. They should have the ability to have a voice and say, this is wrong, this is what's happening in my world, and I need help. It's not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of triumph.
Yeah, agreed on that. But don't you think, Granny, that men do not talk about personal relationships, personal problems? Because most of the men I know don't discuss anything like that.
Well, you know, you also come from a society where you watch a lot of sports figures, you know, take the hits and you know, land on the mat and, you know, scream and yell for their teams and whatnot. So you are already sort of looking at some things as violent and being okay. So when you put that into your mind and your subconscious that violence is okay, so I just took a slap in the mug from my partner, so I better be okay with that to prove that I am a manly man. No, big difference, you know, and I would encourage anybody, regardless of gender, and it takes an average of several times for whomever, whichever your situation or gender, however you define that dynamic, it will take some time for you to actually exit that relationship, but never stop trying.
Yeah, so getting away from men for a minute then, what do you think about domestic abuse on women and children then? What's your views on that?
Who's this for?
I'll throw it over to you, Chris, first then.
Right, well, knowing that Jeanette's, well, I'm against men hitting women, even women hitting men. Even if they're just arguing or what have you, whatever the situation. I ever catch anybody, a bloke hitting a woman, I'll go up and lamp him one, no matter how big he is. And same goes for my son and children. Anybody touches Mark Allen in any shape or form, you will not be seeing Pixie's channel for a very, very long time. That's how strongly I feel about it. Anybody comes anywhere near my family, that'll be it.
Yeah. So I'll throw it over to Raven then. Now, you know, what's your opinions, Raven, then, or Donna, should I say?
Well, I suffered at the hand of a man, and every time I would tell myself that it was just a one-off, that it wouldn't happen again, and he'd always say he loved me and all this. And at one point, I kind of believed he still loved me. It's hard to say that someone can hit you and still love you, but I believed somewhere in him was a good person, even though he was obviously tainted. But I think that the part where he showed his true colors was when I tried to leave him and actually plucked up the courage to actually leave. He then threatens to kill me, saying that if I left him, he'd kill me and he'd take both of us. Now, at that point, I had 2 children, and at that point, it told me that he really was in it for himself. He didn't care about me. He didn't care about our kids, and it was just all about him.
Yeah, and then that's the usual case, isn't it? You know, that these abusers are really bullies and cowards, that they just want to control the people, the partners, or whoever is in the relationship.
Yeah, I took it and took it and took it, and then I plucked up the courage to leave. And then instead of it being about me because I was leaving, it was still all about him.
Yeah, yeah.
Even after I was leaving, it was still, well, oh, what about me? What about me? You can't leave me. And it's like, well, what about me?
Yeah.
What about what I went through? He was still caring more about himself than he was for me, even at the point where I was literally packing my stuff and leaving, you know.
And that's what that's what they tend to do, isn't it? They blame the person who they've abused. They never look at their own shortcomings or anything like that. So Mel,
you can't leave me.
Yeah, Mel, what's your views on that then? If he can hear me, he's turned his mic off. Well, Mel ain't answered, so we'll throw that over to Granny then.
Yeah, I'm here still.
Oh, what's your views then, Mel, on that?
Well, no, I can relate to where Granny Moss is coming from as far as, you know, there should be still the same protections for men, you know, being abused as well as women. That's definitely, you know, a issue right there. But, you know, I still think women have it a lot rougher than men. And then where Pixie is coming from, you know, as far as, you know, men shouldn't be abused, you know, just as well as men. I mean, just as well as women, you know. So, you know, definitely you want to take that seriously. You know, as far as what Night Owl was talking about, you know, definitely you have things where you try to stay and, you know, work it out and whatnot. So, you know, but sometimes it's really more about the other person, you know, than it should be about the person that's being abused. As far as my point of view, you know, abuse should have no place in a relationship, regardless of anything. You know, I mean, there should be ways to communicate. You know, there's classes people can take, stuff you can do to deal with your anger issues or whatever you're going through. And I tell anybody in any relationship, if you're dealing with a significant other or somebody and they're abusive towards you, leave the relationship. As hard as it is, sometimes, you know, you have to walk away for your own safety, because a domestic situation easily turn into a homicide. You know.
Yeah, great. So, what's your views then, Granny, if you don't mind?
That was nervous laughter. That wasn't.
Yeah, I know that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's big difference. Big difference. Well, sometimes when you giggle on the live stream, for some reason, people like to pick that up and think that you're endorsing something, and that's, you know, I wanted to put that out there real clear. Nervous laughter being what it is. This is a real triggered personal topic for me on so many levels. Like, I mean, it really, really is. And just as I put in the chat, when you claim that triumph and you come out of it and you are a victor, don't then continue to play that card as a victim role, because that just shows that you haven't grown or progressed. But behind every victor and behind every triumph, there's at least 10 years of getting past a thing. And I recognize that we want to say, this happened to me, this is the unfortunate set of circumstances, I blame myself, and so on. And sometimes you have to walk through that valley of the shadow of death to realize just exactly how far that journey has taken you. I mean, it's just a fact. But it is a journey. It's an ongoing journey. And it's very, very easy then when you come out of one of those very, very volatile relationships to compare then every single person to what your history has been for you. And that's unfortunate, but it's always going to be in your subconscious. If you've been in a domestic and abusive situation, you will, whether you realize it or not, for some time to come, compare every red flag to what has brought you to that point. And not everybody in your life is there to take advantage of you, and not everybody there is giving you love at the same time, having an ulterior motive. And that's a hard thing to distinguish and understand and bring discernment to. But I would suggest to you that you can, in fact, be triumphant. And since we're dealing with the topic of it being for both men and women, you know, whether you're in a gay relationship, whether you're in a straight relationship, or whether your dynamic is even one that you're dating several people, don't embrace the one person that you feel like you owe something to, even if they've been abusive in regards to their family members, their neighbors. If you see that action being done towards someone else that you are interested in, I suggest to you that at some point it may turn very easily toward you, because they can't control the people that around them that they're trying to control. So that will then turn its attentions on you. So recognize signs and use some discernment in every relationship.
Yeah, that's so true on that. Ruby Slippers has said, Granny, I believe it can be a lifetime of healing and dealing with past abuse. Yeah, I agree with that statement as well, Ruby. Very, very much so. I don't think you really ever get over being abused, or if you are in any sort of relationship where you are getting abused mentally, physically, or whatever way, you never get over it. Mm-hmm. So what's your opinions, Mel, on do you get over abuse? Is there a way to get over being abused? No, he ain't answered yet. So what about you, Raven? What you've been through that. Is it still with you, or have you got over it?
Well, I mean, I've seen a lot of domestic abuse. My dad used to beat my own mum, so I had that when I was younger, and then to experience abuse myself from a partner as well. I found that I did kind of take it into my new relationship slightly, just being a lot more wary, of if he got angry or if he was having a bad day, kind of thing. But I think I've got over it now. It's been a good 10 years. So I think I finally come to terms with what happened and moved on. You can't dwell on it. I think you have to kind of move forward eventually and realize that the past is the past, and you kind of have to move on. If not, you just let it eat at you.
Yeah, so what about you, Mel? Do you think you can get over domestic abuse in time, or what ways do you think you can heal? Oh, he's gone off again. Poor old Mel, he's busy.
Yeah, hello? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, my thing is just, you can get over it, but I think it's important to understand that, you got to feel the emotion. Don't discard it. Don't let anybody make you feel ashamed about what you went through. But at the same time, you acknowledge the fact that things may never be the same, because once you have certain things taken from you or ripped from you, you don't see things the same. But it is what Granny Monster was talking about, how you have to be careful not to judge each one as the same, each situation the same. And it's a fight not to do that, because you're changed by the situation, but in time you can recover from anything. But the question is if you're willing to be open to recovery, open to talking about your situation, finding like-minded people that went through what you went through, people that can really relate. It's like with rape victims, other rape victims will know what you went through, and or somebody who was going through something with addiction, you have meetings for that. Sorry, it's a motorcycle in the background.
Yeah, that's all right, no worry, we can still hear you.
Yeah, so with that situation, I say yes, it's in time, it's you have the ability to recover, but you know what, you don't have to rush and try to be on somebody else's clock. If it takes you 10, 15 years to recover, 20 years to recover, then that's just what it takes, because nobody else is in that situation but you. They haven't gone through it, in that moment like you did.
Yeah.
Unless they actually experienced that before. So, I tell people, hey, you go through it. Find other people that can relate to you, or support groups, counseling, prayer. There's different things you could do, but it takes time.
Yeah. So, what are your views, then, Mel, on the domestic abuse suffered on children by so-called religious people. I'm not mentioning any names or anything like that.
Well, no, I mean, hope not,
in the last few years,
hope not, because we don't want anybody to get sued,
No. Well, that's why I'm not mentioning any names. But when you look, celebrities, religious leaders, and politicians have all domestically abused children. So as you say,
you want to know my honest thoughts on that?
Yeah.
Well, my honest thoughts on that, forgive my language. There's a special place in hell for them.
Yeah.
There's a really special place. And as far as that, for the children who have been victims to that, sorry about that, it's cars going by again. For the children who've been through that, they have a harder road than the adults, because when you go through it as a child, a lot of times you may not have an adult or other children to relate to. So you grow up not trusting people with stigmatisms, you feel inadequate, you don't trust anybody. There's really not a lot of support for that.
Yeah.
But over time, maybe, if you're able to talk about it as an adult, in time you can actually begin to get some healing. So I think children go through it worse.
Yeah. So what's your thoughts on that, Granny?
Okay. It has been tests, results, and researches that once trust is broken, whatever age it is broken, whether you are 3 months of age, 12 years old, whatever the case may be, that once that has been established, it then has been suggested by that research that is where you emotionally stop developing. Like if you are hurt or hit, like let's say at the age of 7, your social capacities and your thought processes then need to really, really, really take some time, because you will at some suggested point stop developing at whatever age the situation has occurred in your life. And when that kind of trust is broken, it can take years and years and years for that person then to socially be able to develop past that age. So, I mean, I can only go from a logical point of view. I can only go from it from the papers that I've read on the particular subject, because I was very, very fortunate not to have been subjected to abuse as a child.
Yeah. Very, very fortunate on that, because I was, when I was a child, my father, similar to Ravens, used to belt hell out of my mother, and if I did anything wrong, I used to get a big, thick leather belt up to the age of 14 when I finally stood up for myself. It's not a subject that I really talk about, as this is, because you don't talk about abuse, mental or whatever. People just don't. So I'll throw it open to you now, Chris, because you've sat there and listened for quite some time. So we'd like your views.
Well, on the child abuse.
Yeah.
Well, there's. I agree in some respect of punishing your child, but not to the point of actually battering them with a slipper or a cane or whatever object to make the point. You can punish them so many other ways. That's not. That's, how can I put it? That is acceptable. Not that you can't really go about just getting a slipper nowadays and just whacking somebody on the bum with it, can you? Because you will get carted away. The smacking and the smacking. You can't just smack any old. You can't smack anybody at all these days. And to me, a smack was good, but a smack with a slipper wasn't, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
You know, I'm trying to get across. I can't really explain it how I want to explain it.
Discipline and there's
There's physical and then there's physical. You can a gentle smack on the bum, just enough to let them know you've done wrong, not a whack, a continuous whack. You know what I mean? You know what I'm trying to get across.
Yeah, yeah.
So there is, like, you can punish a child, but not batter them to death.
Yeah, agreed on that.
Because I didn't get a slip or anything like that, but I knew when I'd done wrong when my dad come out like that and just thick ear or smack on bum.
Yeah,
and then you knew you'd done wrong. So there is that side of things as well.
So, what's your views, Raven, again?
Well, I had a really, really abusive child relationship. I used to get beaten on a day-to-day basis. I've had a slipper, I've had a belt. I used to have what was ever handy. If he'd come in and he'd had a bad day, he'd pick up the nearest thing to him. A belt. I've had a poker used on the back of my legs. I've had a book. I've had whatever was to hand. And he showed no remorse. He said he was punishing me for a reason, and that was it. You just took the punishment, and he just carried on. But I think that's a bit too much. You know, when you start using objects, I can understand like a tap on the bum with your hand, but when you're using physical things to actually punish your child with, you know, a cane or a belt or something, I think you took it just too far.
If I may, Raven, may I ask, given the story that you've shared here today, may I ask what steps you've taken as far as your recovery?
My abuse actually stopped after my dad actually raped me once. I actually stopped getting a daily beating after I was raped by him. He then stopped and left me alone.
Cool. You've been very brave to mention that.
Yeah.
Raven, very brave.
As soon as I was raped, he actually stopped beating me and actually stopped. It took to that extent for him to actually stop. Because I thought I was a good child. I always believed that I'd done nothing wrong. And I think most of my beatings were down to his drinking and drug abuse, to be fair. I don't think I'd actually done anything wrong. But as a child, you know, you took the punishment and you kind of carried on. And then when I was raped, he just all of a sudden just stopped punishing me. I could literally, after that point, I could get away with anything if I'd have wanted to.
Well, Raven, that is a very unfortunate story, and I'm exceptionally sorry that you've had to go through that. Going back to my question, what have you done after you've had to go through all of this? What have you done then to repair the damage in your life?
I moved out as soon as I was old enough. I left at 16 and I moved out of my parents' house the instant I was old enough to leave. And I've barely had contact with my dad since. I've just blocked him out of my life and just carried on.
Cool. That's really upset me listening to your story there, Raven.
Because I can tell you, having been a victim of very abusive relationship, trust, I don't want to trigger any bad memories for you. I don't want you to have any sort of flashbacks either later in your dreams or later on today or even on the stream. So I think I might hold back some of my own personal journey in this. And I'm doing that with respect to what you've been through. But I can tell you that I've had some things in my life of similar regard. And I can tell you then I took it upon myself to, you know, go through counseling. I took it upon myself to speak to community leaders. I took it upon myself to go into therapy, to, yes, and for some time, no longer, thankfully, you know, even going through some drug therapy to deal with the depression and the social anxiety. So don't think once you got out that your healing is done. You know, if you feel like you're still stuck in that memory, don't hesitate. Just like if you had diabetes or a broken leg, or if you had a tumor, if you had cancer, you would seek out the proper needs for your own health, right? So don't think for one moment that you should deny yourself further assistance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very true, Granny. Very true on that. So, how do you feel, Mel, after hearing that story from Raven?
Well, I mean, unfortunately, with the line of work that I've dealt with, not-for-profit shelters and dealing with different females, that story is far too common. You know, and thank you, Raven. I called you Night Owl earlier. Sorry about that. Thank you, Raven, for sharing your story. It's important to know sometimes when we share our pain with other people, you know, it helps them heal and gives them the courage to overcome these situations. But, you know, dealing with that, all I can do really is try to listen and be there, not to, you know, try to interject too much of myself into it, because trying to imagine what a person is going through with that situation is like you have your identity, your whole being stripped away from you. You can't, you know, just from when I'm talking about different females, you can't get that back once you've been violated in that way. And any man, you know, that thinks they can understand that or begin to understand that has no clue or hasn't experienced that themselves. So, you know, like I said, all I could do is just offer my ear, you know, and you know, definitely, you know, my sorrow towards that situation. But also, I'm encouraged by the fact that she has the courage and the bravery to share that story, because there's healing in what she just did.
Yeah,
you know,
agreed.
It's healing in what she just did. Being able to talk about it, being able to, you know, share with other people and not be ashamed, it says a lot. It speaks volumes in itself.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really does. That does. Yeah, you know, because I mean, that's why I wanted to talk about this. I was hoping a few more people would come into the chat and come onto the panel and discuss it. You know, because I mean, you know.
Well, I'll say this to you. I'll say this to you, Keith. It is a touchy subject, because you got to remember something. While it is important to share and have this conversation, it's still a protection of the people that these things have happened to as well.
Yeah.
You know, because it can, like Granny Master, she eloquently put, you don't want to trigger anything by going too deep into it. You know, you want to talk about it. You want to give people the space to say whatever it is that they feel like sharing. But it's still one of those things where, you know, as necessary, or as a person feels comfortable. Yeah. Because everybody doesn't have the bravery. Everybody doesn't have the wherewithal like Raven did to share that. That's courage that happened there. Because a lot of times when these things happen to people, they get shamed into just doing what she did.
Yeah.
You know, there's a shame in talking about it. People are saying, you know, that happened to me. Let's just move on. I don't want to take control of my life. And just to the point what Granny Master was talking about, you know, about the recovery. A lot of times the recovery is being able to talk about it and say what you have to say, and let other people know that you can move on. What Raven did is that, for anybody that's listening, she let you know that you can recover from it, even when you don't have the traditional way of doing it, even when you're ashamed, or you don't know which way to go, or how to feel, or who you can trust, that is still, you know, light at the end of the tunnel. So that's important.
Yeah, it is very, very important. Agree on that. Thanks a lot, Gail Crabtree, for coming in and joining in the chat and listening to this conversation. Go on, Granny. Sorry about that. I interrupted you.
Oh, that's quite all right. What I was just saying was the only reason that I didn't, like I said, the only reason that I didn't want to take Raven down that journey of my set of circumstances is because I don't want other people that have gone through this, your and her as well, to hear yet another rendition. It's not that I'm ashamed of anything that's happened in my life. It's that I want to make sure that her story is heard, and her story of bravery and sharing is the focus. I can tell you that on a very personal, dynamic level, I understand. I've been through a similar set of circumstances with my ex-husband. Okay, without going into great detail, and again, because I don't want to trigger memories that you might genuflect on later, where your triumph in telling and sharing your story is really what the focus should be. And I applaud you for coming forward on so much of what's happened in your life. And I thank you with all of my heart for that. Because really, in a sense, what that does is just reaffirm anyone that's in the chat and on this panel that if this stuff does happen to you, you can continue on with your life, and you can claim your victory, and you can claim your success wherever you are in your recovery. Claim that and own it fully.
Yeah, I fully agree on that. Again, I'm just saying hello to DJM Films.
Well, I mean, definitely, I second the emotion of Granny Monster, what she was saying. You know, you definitely you want to keep the focus on where it should be, and you know, you want to definitely applaud Raven for, like, just being able to reclaim it. You know, and there's different ways of going about it. You know, as long as you're not, like Granny was saying, denying yourself. You know, it's an important thing not to deny yourself the ability to heal or to go through the process. So definitely, I second her emotion.
Yeah, I do as well. You know, and I appreciate you all coming on to discuss this subject.
You're making it sound like it's over now. Is it over?
No, it ain't over. No. It's just that it's upset me a little bit with what Raven said. So I'm getting a bit tongue-tied here, because.
No, but it's important. It's important. What she said was important. I mean, because not to downplay what she's saying. I've heard too many stories like that, and it is emotional. It's serious. It can really take you aback. But the important thing is to say, you know what? Hey, look, it's not impossible to recover from this. And you let other people know that dealing with these type of situations, that you're not alone. That's why this conversation is important. You're not alone. So there's somebody out there listening, or somebody out there who may not want to talk about it, and then they hear the story, and they hear Granny Monster, they hear Raven, they hear us, and they say, "Wow, that's brave of them. That's awesome of them to have that conversation."
Yeah. Well, it has hit me, I mean, to hear Granny's story, to hear Raven's story, I didn't expect that. And, I've got a bit upset, I've got a bit tongue-tied, but, I want to keep the stream on for anybody else who would like to join us, because it's a subject that people don't seem to talk about. I've looked on YouTube and I haven't seen many streams about domestic abuse.
Because yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, go on, Mel. Sorry, just go on.
There's a shame attached to it. You got to understand something. What Raven just did, it takes a lot of courage to do that, because even when you're sharing your story, you're still at that point where you're trying to protect yourself, and then you worry about people judging you, and then there's people with negative comments, and there's things that people try to do intentionally to make you feel bad, and they do victim shaming. We haven't talked about victim shaming yet. There's a part of it where people will talk about, how maybe the person wanted it, or they deserved it, or whatever crap people have in their mind, or how come you weren't more vigilant, and how could you be more vigilant against somebody you didn't know was going to violate you in that way, somebody you trusted, like they say about betrayal. When it comes to betrayal rarely comes from somebody you don't know. Yeah.
So can you elaborate a bit further on that then, Mel, what you've just fetched up?
You talking about the victim shaming? Sometimes let's look at it like politicians. Let's say you have a politician who who's sexually assaulted, you know, a woman or somebody like that, you know, the first thing they'll come out and say is that the person is lying, or they're fighting to keep their reputation in order, and they'll slander the person. And I hate to bring up Bill Cosby. Look at Bill Cosby.
Yeah.
Look at what Bill Cosby, you know, an American comedian, for those that don't know, look at the victim shaming that he went through to try to discredit, was it 270 something women? I forget how many it was. I don't know if it's over 25 different women. I think it was over 25 different women. I mean, how do you say over 25 different women are lying? At some point, something happened to somebody. You know, so in order to protect your reputation, be it you're a politician, be it you're a comedian, you know, be it you a religious figure, you know, people do stuff like that. You know, so, and it's like Raven was saying, you know, because I'm listening to her, and she was like, look, I don't felt like I've done anything to deserve that. I was a good kid. And I don't know her personally, but regardless of the situation, I'll say she didn't do anything to deserve that. You know, whatever the circumstances was, she didn't deserve that. There's no possible scenario when it comes to that type of situation that you could justify where somebody deserves that. You know, it's no logical way you could say somebody deserves that. I don't care who you are. You know, so it's kind of crazy as to how it goes. You know, that's why it's important for these stories to be told. It's important for these things to be said. And I know you're a little tongue-tied, Keith, but this is what happens when you have these kind of conversations. You hear things that will make you sit down. You hear things that will make you say, you know what, folks, we're gonna end the live stream here, and I'll get back to you. Because you're like so horrified, and it shows sometimes, you know, how vicious as human beings we can be, you know, and you know, but on the other side there is healing, there is support, there are people who care, and that's what we need to let people know. That's why I agreed to come on when you first, you know, got me on here. I said, look, you know, we can talk about whatever you want, but what I'm going to say is that to anybody out there who suffered from this and went through that, there are men out there who understand, there are women out there who understand, there are people out there who are on your side and know that what happened to you was really screwed up. And, you know, we got you in our thoughts and our prayers, you know.
Yeah.
And if there's anything we can do, let us know.
Just invited Random Life on because she says send her a link, so I've just sent the link to her.
You know, I mean, it's a touchy subject because, you know what, it's so intimate. It's like, you know, it's something that comes into your living room, it's something in your bedroom, it's something in your kitchen, it's something that affects your family. It's something that you got to understand. We started off the conversation talking about domestic violence. Yeah. Just the physical abuse, and it goes into the sexual, it goes into the mental, it goes into the shaming of it. You know what I'm saying? It goes into, sometimes people use it as a weapon. They use domestic violence and rape as a weapon. You know, so it's crazy. It's a deep conversation that a lot of people don't want to have, because Granny Monster put a thing on it. She used the word, people get triggered. And sometimes you don't mean to do it. It's not something that you want to do, but it's like you were saying as well, Keith, you know, enough people don't talk about it. You know, sometimes we want to pretend like it doesn't exist.
Yeah. Well, that is humanity in general, isn't it? Because, you know, I mean, as I say, I wanted to create an event because Granny says, when you do live streams, I always remember this from Granny, it's got to be an event. So that's why I want to do subjects that other people don't talk about. You know, I mean, I've got quite a few subjects that I'm going to fetch up in my live streams. Quite a few. Yeah.
Oh yeah, believe me.
Sensitive subjects, get a panel on, and everything like that.
Well, if anybody knows me, he knows I don't shy away from the I don't shy away from the controversial. So
that's
it has to be talked about.
Yeah. So, anything else you'd like to say, Granny, at the moment?
Well, I'm anxious to hear from our Random Life Productions.
Yeah, if she comes on, I've sent her the link, you know, via email. So whether she gets it or not is another thing, because she always seems to have trouble getting it.
You sent it to her email?
Yeah, I've sent it to her email. Yeah.
And
yeah, sometimes we do that.
I don't want Raven to feel like put under some sort of magnifying glass, and all of the examples were based on her life. Hello.
Hello.
Hello, Random
Hello,
Life
Gail.
Productions. So,
Hey, Random Life.
So, what are your thoughts on this touchy subject?
I think it's very, very complex because the nature of the abuse is complex, I guess.
Yeah, random. You got any headphones you could put in?
Yeah, I do. I'll take the camera off and then I'll put the headphones in.
Yeah, because I can hear you, but your voice is faint.
Okay, no worries.
It's always faint. I will see if I can turn it up a bit.
No, it's not that. I think she needs to hook something in, or like a mic set up or something, because you can hear her, but I don't know if she needs to bring it closer or not.
Okay, I'll put some headphones in. I'll put some headphones in. Carry on.
Carry on. That's funny. No, but I definitely agree with what Granny was coming. We're not trying to put, we're not trying to put Raven under a microscope.
No, is there anything you want to add, Raven, then to the conversation?
No, I don't mind. I don't mind you guys talking about. I actually did a live stream a couple of months ago on the rape and the abuse I'd actually suffered, and I actually did a whole live stream on it, and I highlighted the abuse I'd had and the rapes I'd gone through in an actual live stream. It's now private, so you can't actually hear about it. That was a one-time thing, or it was a one-time thing.
But I do have a question for you, Raven, when you finish.
Yeah, you go ahead, Melma.
Well, no, I'm gonna let you finish saying what you're saying because I didn't want to lose the question.
No, the live stream's basically private now. It was a one-time thing, but when Eagle said he was doing this, I thought it was important to have it, highlighted that I did keep my abuse a secret for a good many years. And even when I came out and said that I'd actually had it, I actually got people that didn't believe me, even then.
Oops.
Yeah, some people shouting. Yeah, welcome, Random. Anyway, so what's your opinion on this touchy subject then?
Like I said, it's a very difficult. Can you hear me clearly now? By the way,
yeah.
Like I said, it's a very complex story, and every individual has their own unique story, and every individual has their own unique experience. But the words "I love you," irrespective of what relationship you are, still resonate to me when the beatings and whatever happens. That draw of actually loving someone is so powerful. And I don't know if that was apparent in your relationship, Raven, or in your relationship, Granny, that you convinced yourself that if you were beaten, it meant that they were. I don't know. I guess violence perpetuates itself and it translates into love after a while. I don't know.
No, it never translated to that for me.
But do you know the term, though, when you hear sort of people talking and you hear sometimes that people split up and they'll go, but I love him, and then he hit me, but I love him. I don't know how many beatings it takes for somebody not to say I love him anymore. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, my set of circumstances was, there was a lot of politics and business involved in it all. There was a lot of protection from other people on his part. And it's just a very convoluted and long drawn out story, I can assure you. Okay. But the end result is we're divorced and he's dead. So, happy ending.
I wish everybody could take Granny's way out. Be brilliant, wouldn't it?
But I mean, I do take ownership of the fact that, after the first, verbal abuse, I do take ownership after the first, slap and stuff like that. I did choose to stay there, regardless of the choices or the history or the back end of it all. In a bigger picture, yes, it was still my choice to stay there. I mean, it was. And I think that's part of the hardest part of being a person in recovery, is to take ownership of what mistakes that were made along the way. But you have to do that in some regard so that you don't make them again. You know, to learn from those processes, I think, is part of the journey toward the maturity of it all.
Yeah, agreed. So, are you got any more thoughts then, Mel?
Well, I have a question actually for Raven, because it was something when she did, speak up. I wanted to know what led her to the point where she would have the courage to speak up like that, because I've encountered a lot of people who privately have told me stuff like that and went through situations, like that, which I really can't get into. But to publicly do that, I was wondering what type of I don't know. I guess what was your I don't want to say what was your thought process, but what led you to being as comfortable sharing that as you were, or what led you to the space where you could say it, with almost without fear, if I'm saying it correctly.
I kept it a secret for 20 years before I told anyone that I'd actually been raped at all by my parent. And it took for me to hear that the parent that abused me was actually dying before I actually told any member of my family what had happened. And it was that point that I felt that if he was in a frail state, me coming out and telling somebody else, I wouldn't get any backlash from him for doing it. I felt that he was at that point weaker than me, and that I could tell someone, and that hopefully he would leave me alone. It sounds silly, but he felt...
No, it doesn't. It doesn't.
And
it doesn't sound silly.
I felt that he was weaker at that point, and that I could come out and say, look, this happened, and he didn't have any hold at me at that point.
Okay. Oh, wow.
Which sounds weird.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't, because I mean, let me actually repeat that back, see if I got this correctly. So what you're saying is that because he was in a weakened state, he felt like, he couldn't hurt you. You had the strength to say your piece, and it wasn't going to be the backlash. So no, that actually makes a lot of sense, because you felt like as long as he was in a position where he had any kind of ability or strength, he could come back at you. However he chose to.
Yeah, that was how I saw it. And
no, that makes sense.
It took for him to actually be told that he was going to die sooner rather than later for me to actually do a live stream on it.
Yeah.
Because he actually wants to see me before he dies. And he's tried to reach out to me, and I've told him no, which is why I did a live stream, because I wanted to hear what people's opinions were, because I was confused.
Well, I mean,
kind of how I
control you
did. I wanted people to hear my story of the abuse I'd had and the rape, and then I needed to hear from a religious side of things, to forgive him, as he's religious. Kind of thing.
Well, I mean, no, definitely glad you shared it. I mean, definitely glad you shared it. I mean, and again, sorry for that horrific thing that you had to experience, but definitely, I think there's a lot of people who would be blessed, or definitely, enlightened by what you shared. And what you said doesn't sound silly, and we do believe you, because I know you said something about people not believing you. I don't take lightly anytime somebody comes with a story or a situation that's happened to them like that. So, like I said, it helps. And I think it's important for people that haven't experienced that to listen to that and see how vulnerable or powerless a person can be made to feel, to let us know, as men or people who've never experienced that, to have a certain type of sensitivity to it. That's why when you were talking, I don't want you to think in any part of it was silly. None of it sounded silly to me. It actually sounded, like you were trying to get some agency and actually gain the power back for you. You know?
Yeah. I think when I was a child, and obviously, you know, at such a young age, I think my dad obviously thought, you know, I was young. He does know that he did the abuse, because we did confront him about it, and I actually confronted him myself. But he's always claimed that he doesn't remember it happening. He was always drunk when it happened, so he always had an excuse, or he was drugged up and he calls that as an excuse. So he has what he classes reasons for his actions, but he's never actually come out and owned up to it or anything like that. He's always shooed it off. So.
Well, it's important that you put that up, because people do use that as a defense, and I'll say that to anybody listening or anybody that's ever been in a situation where they may have been the abuser. It's not a valid excuse, because if you're in the presence of mind where you can go and buy the drugs and buy the alcohol, you made a conscious choice to put it in your body. So if you made a conscious choice to put it in your body, knowing what it could do or it could take away things from you, then that was on you.
So Gail, would you like to say anything on what's been going on then?
I think I kind of wanted to ask Mel a question, actually. It prompted me to think about it. In Mel's circumstances, if he met somebody like a female who he really loved and she was violent towards him, like smacked him, what would he do?
Well, I mean, if she doesn't have a gun in her hand, I'm going to get out of the vicinity. I mean, I tell any female that I deal with, I say to them, seriously, like I said, if it gets to a situation where you physically feel like you have to abuse me, then the relationship is over.
Right.
Whether I'm married with children, whether we got business together, because physically you're putting me in a situation to where my personal space is being violated, and it may prompt me or provoke me to violate you in a way that I shouldn't, because there's no cause for it. Like I said, unless somebody's trying to kill me, you got a gun in your hand. No. So you have to cut it off at the head. I've ended relationships because of stuff like that.
Really?
Yeah, because here's what happens. As a man, if I respond, now I'm just as wrong, because I should have some kind of constraint.
Yeah.
Especially if I'm strong, or if I have more weight or whatever, so it to me, I can't speak for everybody else. To me, relationships end because of stuff like that.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, Mel. I just can't understand why people don't walk out of abusive relationships.
I understand, because it's like what Gail was talking about earlier. You're waiting, you're trying to, get the person to love you, and you want to, maybe the beatings to stop after a while. So, it's a betrayal, it's a disappointment. Sometimes people are trying to change the person. I've heard people say, you know what, if I stay, if I do this, if I cook, if I have sex with them, or if I'm more understanding, if I let them spend my money, or let them, do something else, then maybe they'll change. So there's a hope that people will change. And
yeah. And I think we all have that, Mel.
Yeah, we do. But some of us have, a lot of us have I guess our rope is short. I don't want to say it, like I said, that's maybe not the best terminology, but we have limits. Some of our limitations are a lot shorter than others. Like we have a time. So go ahead.
Sorry, I also think there's other things that you need to look at, like children in the marriage, financial control, where a person can't move out of that relationship because they're financially dependent on their husband. Their kids may be in good schools, all of that other stuff, where the woman or the man feels they can't leave.
Well, this is where me and you have a divergence, and I hate to say this, I agree that those things are a factor, but domestic calls start off as domestic calls the first couple of times, right? Yeah. The reason you leave is because after a while, those domestic calls turn into homicide. Yeah. So it's a question now. Now, if the level of violence is increasing, right, and the abuse, At what point does it go until it becomes deadly? You know, how long do you stay until now somebody's in a body bag?
It's a difficult one, Mel, I guess, because you don't know when that's going to happen. It could happen the first time, or it could happen the 50th time.
I mean, I've had situations with that personally where I've had to separate, you know, my people and whatnot. I've had family members who I've had to get in the middle of because the situation was going to get, you know, deadly on a domestic, you know, violence thing. I can't really go into detail because it's not my story to share, but I've had situations where I've had to, you know, like say, hey, look, you know, if this doesn't end, you know, cops are going to have to be called because I know that the person who was being wronged was willing to retaliate, because people there's one thing we haven't talked about in this conversation. We haven't talked about the victims who've retaliated in violence. We talked about how, you know, okay, the abuse is violent and then, you know, you kill the victim. But there are times when the abused have had enough and they say, look, you know, maybe I'll poison this person, or maybe I'll stab this person, or I'm going to get them. They're going to meet their maker soon. So I'll tell anybody to leave regardless of the circumstances, because you have to sacrifice something or else you're going to wind up having a body on your hands. And but also too, I'm not going to shame somebody for staying. If you don't have that strength to walk away, then, you know, I wish you all the best, and hopefully you survive that situation, because each day is a survival. You know, I've like I said, I've dated people who were in those type of situations where they had horrific situations where they will be constantly abused by somebody that, you know, supposedly said that they loved them, you know, and it's only a matter of time before it turns deadly. So my thing is, yeah, you can go to the financial part of it. You can weigh that and say, okay, I got to be here for the children and this and that, and I'm dependent on somebody. But is that worth your life?
But some people say that is worth their life, and then it's a difficult quandary because they don't want to move out, because they don't want to lose their house, they don't want to take that child out of that school because it limits their education. I don't know what your thoughts are on this, Granny or Eagle. I don't know if Eagle's gone off for a sec.
No, I'm still here.
Okay.
I'm here too. Ready, willing, and able. I just didn't want to overstep anybody.
No.
Yeah, go ahead. It's a conversation. We're here.
Yeah, but at the same time, I want to make sure that everyone has their fair voice. My situation, oh wow, it was quite a bit different, I should say, in that, like, the ex-mother-in-law was the clerk of the village that I worked in, so she wrote the paychecks to the very same people that were like, we need to keep this hush-hush, we don't want to ruin anybody, you ruin her son, then, you know, we don't get paid, so we are keeping a very watchful eye on this set of circumstances. You know, we'll patch you up and put some band-aids on your boo-boos, and, you know, you'll be all right, and so on and so forth. And each time then becomes more and more volatile, to the point where, yeah, it could have very easily cost my life. Okay. The end result was horrific. Trust, it was like a horror show. It was like a horror movie. My body will never be the same. It will never be the same. But I can do what I can then to repair myself mentally. I can do what I can to prepare myself socially. I can do what I can to take ownership of my own mistakes, and I can certainly take responsibility, the process that I need for recovery. Now, I know that it's been suggested sometimes that you have to forgive the person that put you through a thing. Okay. And I will then reflect back onto the words of Maya Angelou when she said, yeah, you can forgive someone, but it doesn't mean you need to invite them over for lunch, you know? So yeah, you can do that and then in effect forgive your own mistakes and your own transgressions. But that doesn't necessarily mean I have to be in association with your family or the persons around you. So when I made that clean break, it was clean and over 18 hours away. And I mean, there is some triumph in that. I mean, there really is. And I can tell you that forgiveness comes at a great length and a great price. And I get where you're saying, Jeanette, that you will never forgive your ex, period. And that's, completely, thoroughly, and 100% understandable. But what you also need to maybe think about is the forgiveness of your own being and your own soul, because that takes a lot of work. I mean, a lot of work. It really has on my behalf. I can really only represent myself and my own story of recovery and nobody else's, because I didn't walk your journey. You know what I mean? I can only take it so far in the experiences that I've had.
Mm. Eagle? Hello?
Yes, I'm here. It's just that I'm just wondering why Ian's asked me to take his wrench away. So I thought I might have upset him with the subject. That's all, So I will discuss it with him some other time.
Yeah, no, don't worry about it. I think he'll discuss it later.
I mean, I'll say this much, I mean, hopefully anybody understands that this conversation, at least not to speak so much for Eagle, wasn't brought up to offend anybody or to trigger anybody. But we understand that if you are triggered by this conversation, I mean, like I say in my live streams, that these conversations may or may not be for you.
Mm-hmm.
But nobody is mad if you feel the way that you feel. Sometimes it's just not for you.
Right.
And I think the thing is this is an incredibly difficult subject that impacts so many lives, and there are so many people scarred by it, that people are traumatized by their experiences and they find it hard to talk about it. And I think having a forum where actually a man is saying, I want to talk about domestic violence, hopefully will evoke a response and say, well, yeah, I actually do. And actually Keith's being very brave and addressing this subject.
Yeah, that is true too. But it's all too often that these are one-off conversations. It's a thing that needs to be constantly addressed.
Yes, absolutely.
It can't. I mean, nothing against Keith. It has to be a situation, an ongoing conversation. Where a lot of people get involved, because Keith is one part, you're one part, I'm one part, Granny is one part. We can only do so much, together collectively in this setting. It's a conversation that has to continue far beyond this live stream.
And I think it's a conversation that basically, like Gail was putting out the National Domestic Violence Helpline in the UK and America, which she did earlier on. And I think that's important for people who are survivors to know that there is that helpline. There are family justice centres in the UK and the US that are willing to help you. And there are all other organisations like the Samaritans that you can contact that will give you numbers of different authorities. There's LGBT advice centres as well for people who are victims of domestic violence. And hopefully in the future, there'll be programs that will deal with the perpetrators of domestic violence too, because you can't just focus on the punishment. You have to somehow focus on trying to get these men back into society and actually not abusing. And then hopefully that will come be a part of the future. I'm hoping that will come.
Well, Granny did say something. Go ahead. You was about to say something, Granny?
So sorry, Mel. And it's really easy if you have that past journey. It's so very easy to immediately go into the defensive, because you feel like you're protecting your own journey, and you're feeling like you're protecting the very things that define you and that have had you grow and have had you ascertain different tools and mental capacities and having grown as a person. So it's very easy for a person to immediately go on the defensive. It's so very easy to do that. And I understand that, because believe you me, initially after I went through all of this, I was very quick to defend who I was. Like really, like maybe even overstating how okay I was. And actually I wasn't. I really wasn't okay. I was just defending myself. and I felt like I needed to be that defensive person. And really now it's just kind of like a painting on a wall that I kind of go by now and again and go, interesting. And I keep going because eventually
that's funny that you use interesting. I caught that.
I know you did. You see what I did there?
I see what you did. That's funny.
Yeah, but eventually you just kind of go through that little art museum, if you will, and say, well, okay, that's where that's hanging right now, and now on to the next portrait of who I am.
I can relate to that.
Yeah, I can as well.
But I got to go back to an earlier point that Granny made about the protections that come from the abusers, because Gail talked about, dealing with the abusers. You also have to deal with the protections because Granny said it gets political, and it does, because you do have people who are powerful, who have means, and they have people behind them to try to protect them and their identity. Nobody wants to be seen as this person that has done this wrong, but they have no problem doing the wrong. Like, one thing I've noticed with domestic abusers or people who have abused, women or sexually or whatever, there are people who don't want to be confronted publicly at all. They'll fight it tooth and nail.
Yep. Yeah.
However, when you look at it now, it's the sort of things are starting to come out about high profile people. So, the Cosby thing and the Bernstein thing that's come out recently, where they've identified these perpetrators. So I think what's happening is that people are there's more reported domestic violence or any other sort of violence than there was before. More people are coming forward, more people are being more vocal. And the internet, good or bad in these situations, is also a wellspring of information for people to get help and assistance. And I think that's brilliant that we have this internet thing that can really help people, and really help people who have been victims of this get together and have a conversation, which they may not have had before.
You got me to the point. You got to that point before I was. But I was going to say, social media is definitely plays a pivotal role in that, because now more people have a platform, as opposed to where you can't shut the voices up now, because let's say this is happening in a company, right? Somebody is sexually harassed, or there's a domestic violence situation that's going on in the home or whatever. People will ignore it in the past. Now people can go on social media and say, this is what happened to me. Do a video, put up a post, start a social campaign, and that's powerful, to have your own voice and your own platform to say what you need to say.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Eagle, what's going on in the chat? What's people's observations?
Well, Tina's saying that she's suffering problems with her next door neighbour. And, this, because I'm talking to DJ Ian as well, I've just sent him a message because I want to find out what I've done to upset him.
Right.
So I'm listening to you going on. So, carry on without me for a few minutes until I get my mind around things, because I don't like upsetting anybody, and I'm waiting to see what Ian has to say. I must have said something sometime, so I don't know when.
Well, you haven't said anything that's on in this stream, Keith. So I
know that. It's just that I don't like upsetting anybody. So,
well, I mean, Keith, if you need to end it here to deal with something else, I mean,
no, because I like people's opinions on this subject, and I've got a good panel on, and people are still coming in, so it is an interesting topic.
Yeah,
it's just that my mind's been taken over. So carry on. I am here. I am in full control, I hope.
Don't worry, you're moderating a good conversation.
Yeah. Carry on then. I do apologise for this, but when I upset anybody, it gets to me, because I don't like upsetting anybody. I am a person who very emotional. I tend to keep things to myself, but I do get a bit emotional and upset sometimes, and sometimes I just feel like if I'm causing any problems, you know, I might as well give up because, you know,
don't give up.
You know, yeah, but it's my philosophy on life that do unto others as you'd like done to yourself. And all right, we all make mistakes in what we say. You know, we've got to be very careful. And I have learned to be very careful on what I say on live streams because some people can take it the wrong way. And
Keith,
if I've upset Ian, yeah.
Keith, listen to me, right? You are a complete and total gentleman. Yeah. And nobody is going to be upset by what you say because there's not a vindictive bone in your body. If there was a vindictive bone in your body, I wouldn't associate with you.
Yeah.
So whatever it is, it's a silly little thing, I'm telling you, because it's nothing major. Yeah. It really isn't. So don't take it too personally, honestly. That's what I'm just saying. But moving on, and back to the subject of domestic violence.
You can't please all the people all the time. I mean, it's that's a hard fact to face, buddy. But it is absolutely true. Whether it's an internet troll or somebody that's just like socially disagreeing with who you are, there's always going to be somebody that may be having a bad day, a rough time. You don't know what they came into the stream with. You know, you don't know what kind of day they've had. You know, you just don't know. So it's not necessarily always something that you did. You don't know what brought them to that point. You know, so I suggest you, just like Gail said, you know, you're good. Don't sweat the small stuff and pretty much all small stuff. You know. But going back,
I just focus on making dreams come true. So, you know, that's all it is.
There you go. There you go. But yeah, you know, and side note, just to try and bring a little bit of levity into this, once again, thank everyone that participated in the Gotham story on the Marketplace. You know, yes, I'm giving him an unashamed shout out because
a shameless plug.
That was absolutely on point. And I'm even sitting here right now in a Batman shirt, so go figure how important this is to me. And
that Mel character was pretty awesome, you know. Yeah.
I hear
that chap.
I've got to check him out. Yeah. But I kind of wanted to lighten the mood a little bit, if at all possible, maybe put some people at ease, because this is a highly electronic and electrified subject matter. And I get that. And going back to the title, and that is, let's talk about the domestic abuse of men and women. And it goes back to what I was saying earlier, okay? And the statistics are crazy. And I said this earlier in the chat, that reports are showing an incline in number, or decline rather, in number of women, and an increase in the number of men reporting abuse, okay? And that was done by the University of Illinois in Springfield, okay? Not to be mistaken with, you know, Homer Simpson or anything like that, all right? But what I wanted to ask the chat as well as the panelists, because there is now an increase in the male capacity to come forward, if they wanted to increase that voice, what would you suggest they do?
Okay. I'll let them answer in the chat first.
I can't read the chat, so whoever's got the chat up.
I got the chat open. If there's anything.
No one is at the moment. I think I'm going to finish the discussion because I'm a bit upset. So can you stay on, Gail, for a few minutes?
Yes, of course.
You know, because it has upset me, this.
Okay.
So thanks a lot for coming on, Granny. Thanks a lot, Mel.
Anytime.
And I will see you all. And everybody in the chat, thanks a lot. So bye for now.
Bye, everybody.